The stagecoach rattled across the empty plains, wheels creaking, dust trailing behind like a ghost. Inside sat a young woman clutching a small carpet bag to her chest, her gloved hands trembling. Clara Whitmore, 21, had never traveled farther than the brick streets of Boston. Now she was headed to a place she could barely find on a map, the Wyoming Territory. The letter she held was folded so many times the edges had worn thin. It was her lifeline and her sentence both. My name is Elias McGraw, a widowed rancher with a daughter. I seek a wife of steady character and kind heart. I can offer a home, food, and protection in exchange for honesty and respect. It wasn't a love letter. It was a contract between two souls desperate in their own ways. Clara's father had died in the textile mill last winter. Her mother followed soon after, leaving Clara with debts she couldn't pay and a future she couldn't face. The advertisement for a mail-order bride had seemed her only way out, a doorway to survival, if not happiness. When the stage finally rolled to a stop in front of the tiny town of Willow Creek, Clara stepped down into a world that felt like another planet. The air was colder, cleaner, the sky stretched forever, and the wind carried the scent of pine and snow. A few townsfolk stared as she passed, curious, wary, measuring the stranger in the pale blue dress who looked too fine and too fragile for such a rough land. Then she saw him, the man from the letters, Elias McGraw, broad-shouldered, weathered by wind and work, his eyes the color of storm clouds. He stood by a wagon, hat in hand, studying her with quiet caution. "You're Miss Whitmore?" he asked, voice low and steady. "Yes, sir," she answered, trying to keep the tremor from her tone. "Mr. McGraw will do," he said. Then after a pause, "You came a long way. Hope you ain't disappointed." Clara's lips parted, but no words came. She wasn't sure what she expected. Maybe someone younger, softer, less haunted. But there was kindness in his eyes too, hidden deep beneath the dust of sorrow. "I'm not disappointed," she said finally. "Good," he nodded, taking her trunk. "It's half a day's ride to the ranch. You best hold on tight. Roads ain't friendly after dark." The wagon jolted forward, rolling out of town and into open land. The silence between them was heavy but not unkind. Clara stole glances at the horizon. Endless fields of gold grass. Distant mountains painted white with snow. The west was beautiful, yes, but lonely. Every sound echoed, every mile felt like a test. As the sun dipped lower, Elias spoke without turning his head. "I got a little girl, Abby, 6 years old. Her ma died near 2 winters ago. Fever took her quick." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." He nodded once. "She don't talk about it much. Don't like strangers neither. But she's a good girl. You'll see." They reached the ranch just as the sky turned purple with dusk. A modest white house stood near a red barn, surrounded by rolling pasture and a split-rail fence. Smoke rose from the chimney, carrying the smell of stew and wood smoke. A small figure ran from the porch, blonde curls bouncing, feet bare despite the cold. "Papa!" she cried. Elias dismounted, smiling faintly for the first time. "Abby, this here's Miss Whitmore. She's come to help us." The girl's bright blue eyes studied Clara curiously. "Help us how?" Clara knelt, her heart pounding. "Well," she said softly, "I'll help cook and clean. And maybe read you stories if you'd like." Abby tilted her head, then reached out a small hand. "You talk pretty," she said. "Are you gonna be my mama?" The question hit Clara like a bullet and a blessing all at once. She didn't know how to answer. She wasn't sure she could ever fill that place. But something in the girl's hopeful eyes stirred, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "We'll see, sweetheart," she whispered. Elias cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "Abby, show Miss Whitmore her room." Inside, the house was plain but clean. A fire burned in the hearth. On the mantel sat a faded photograph, a young woman holding a baby, smiling as though time had never been cruel. Clara looked at it and felt her heart twist. That night, she unpacked her few belongings, a Bible, a locket, 2 dresses, and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. The loneliness pressed heavy on her chest. She thought of home, of church bells, her mother's voice, the hum of the city, all gone now. Downstairs she could hear Elias moving about quietly, locking doors, stoking the fire. Then came Abigail's small voice. "Papa, do you think she'll stay?" Elias's answer came after a long pause. "I reckon we'll find out." Clara lay awake long after the house fell silent. She had come west to survive. But as she listened to the prairie wind sing outside her window, she wondered if it was possible to live again too. The next morning the sun rose golden across the fields. Chickens clucked in the yard, and somewhere a cow lowed for milking. Clara tied her hair back and stepped into her new life, her heart still trembling but alive with something new. Hope. She didn't know it yet, but before the week was through, that little girl would ask her the question. That would change everything. The first few days on the McGraw Ranch passed slow and strange. Like walking through a dream Clara couldn't quite wake from. She rose before dawn to help with chores, learned the creak of every floorboard, and the sound of Abigail's small footsteps running through the halls. Though Elias spoke little, his actions spoke enough. The way he handed her gloves before she went outside, or left an extra log by the stove when the nights turned cold. Clara was grateful for the quiet. The city had always been full of noise, carriages clattering, people shouting, church bells tolling. Here there was only the wind, the lowing of cattle, and the steady rhythm of life shaped by survival. Abigail stayed close but cautious like a skittish colt. She followed Clara everywhere, eyes wide, curious. One morning Clara found her sitting on a stool in the kitchen, clutching her doll and watching intently as she kneaded dough. "Do you miss your home back east?" the girl asked suddenly. Clara paused, flour dusting her sleeves. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I think maybe I was meant to come here." Abigail nodded thoughtfully, as if that answer made perfect sense. "Mama used to say the Lord sends people when you need 'em most." Clara's hands froze on the dough. She didn't know what to say, so she just smiled faintly and kept kneading. By late February, snow still clung to the hills, but the days grew longer. The ranch slowly came alive again, calves born, fences mended, life returning. Elias worked from dawn to dark, shoulders bent under the weight of both labor and memory. Clara noticed the way he'd glance toward the empty rocking chair on the porch, or pause when he passed the photo of his late wife. He wasn't cruel or distant, just lost somewhere between past and present. And Clara, though she had her own ghosts, began to find peace in the rhythm of that house. Then came the storm. It started as a whisper of wind in the afternoon and grew into a howl by evening. Snow fell thick and fast, covering the world in white. Elias rode out to bring the horses in from pasture, promising he'd be back by sundown. But night came, and he didn't. Clara tried to stay calm for Abigail's sake. She built up the fire, told stories, sang softly. The wind screamed through the shutters, rattling the glass. Hours passed. The little girl's brave face finally broke, and tears welled in her eyes. "Papa's out there all alone," she whispered. "What if he don't come back?" Clara knelt beside her and took her hands. "Your papa's strong, Abby. He'll find his way home. He always does." But inside, her heart hammered with fear. Just before midnight, a knock shook the door. Heavy, desperate. Clara flung it open. Elias stood there, half frozen, his coat stiff with ice, his beard crusted white. She rushed forward, helping him inside, her hands trembling. "You're frozen through!" she cried. He gave a weary half-smile. "Lost the trail near the creek. If I hadn't seen the lantern light from the house, I might have stayed out there till spring." Clara's breath caught. "Then it's a good thing we kept the lamp burning." He met her eyes then, and in that single look, something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, respect, maybe even something deeper neither dared name. When Abigail saw him, she ran into his arms, sobbing into his chest. Elias held her tight, whispering, "It's all right, baby girl. Papa's home." The next morning dawned calm and golden, as if the storm had never happened. The world outside glittered, white and still. Elias came down the stairs to find Clara by the stove, hair loose around her shoulders, humming softly as she poured coffee. Abigail sat at the table, drawing with a stub of charcoal. It was such a simple scene. a woman, a child, a home. Yet it hit him harder than any wind ever had. After breakfast he went out to split firewood, but his thoughts were restless. When he came back inside, Abigail was tugging Clara's skirt, whispering something. Clara looked flustered, cheeks flushed pink. "What's all this?" Elias asked, setting his gloves aside. Abigail turned to him, eyes shining. "Papa, I asked Miss Whitmore something important." "Oh?" he said, brow lifting. "And what's that?" The little girl clasped her hands. "I asked if she could be Mama." The room went still. Clara froze where she stood, eyes wide, the color rising in her cheeks. Elias felt the world tilt slightly. The words hit like sunlight after many grey mornings. He looked at Clara, searching her face. "And what did you tell her?" Clara swallowed, voice barely a whisper. "I told her I'd try, if her papa would let me." The silence between them wasn't awkward this time. It was full, alive with everything that didn't need saying. Elias stepped closer, his rough voice gentle now. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "you've done more for this house in a month than I could in a year. You brought laughter back to my little girl. You gave me something I thought I'd buried, hope." Tears shimmered in Clara's eyes. He reached out, taking her hand in his calloused one. "If you'll have us, both of us, I reckon there's no one better fit to be her mama. And my wife." The answer was written in her smile before she even spoke. That spring, under a sky as blue as forgiveness, Clara Whitmore became Clara McGraw. The preacher's words were simple, but they carried across the valley like music. Abigail held her hand tight, beaming with pride. Years later, folks traveling through Wyoming would still talk about the McGraw Ranch, the laughter, the light, the love that lingered there. They'd say a young woman came west once, frightened and alone, and found not just a husband, but a home, a child's love, and the courage to begin agave. And that, folks, was the Virgin. Mail-order bride was terrified until the ranchers. Little girl asked, "Can you be Mama?" If you love heartfelt tales of courage, faith, and love on the American frontier, don't forget to subscribe to Old West Legends, where every sunset holds a story, and every story keeps the West alive.